Have you ever had a really strong opinion on something? And you really held on to that opinion, thinking it would never change, not in a million years? In 2015, Mass Effect Andromeda finally got announced. The game had some massive hype building up to its release. One of the most successful action role-playing franchises of the Xbox 360 era, running on the Frostbite 3 engine for the, at the time, new console generation. After 5 years of literally no new Mass Effect releases and a 6-month delay, the game finally launched in March of 2017. To, let's just say, less than lukewarm reception. Many angry Reddit posts and countless YouTube videos making fun of the game were shared among gamers and fans alike. Could it actually be this bad? A bad Mass Effect game? I was scared to even touch this game. To be honest, I was shocked. How could a Mass Effect game be bad? But I wanted to see for myself, so I bought the game close to release and I popped the game in, and after about 5 hours or so, I had to put the controller down. The realization kicked in. I was disappointed. The media and the fans were correct. Now 4 years later, Mass Effect Legendary Edition came out, and now having binged it in more or less 2 weeks, I have to say, these games still hold up beautifully. After completing them, I got curious. I had the urge to replay Andromeda and give it another shot, just to see if my reaction was warranted all these years ago. I wanna share my thoughts and opinions on this most recent playthrough, mostly spoiler-free. I don't want to spoil any major story events for anyone who might be open to the idea of replaying this game after watching this video. My goal with this video is to share my newfound appreciation for this game. So here we go. Now before we start though, let's make one thing clear. When I'm referring to BioWare later on in this video, I'm actually talking about the B team stationed in Montreal. Main studio BioWare already started working on Anthem, long before Andromeda was even announced, so that might already raise some red flags for some people. Having the game be set in the Andromeda galaxy a good 600 years or so after the events of Mass Effect 3 was probably the smartest move on part of the devs. This way they could evade having to deal with the fallout of ME3's ending, and yes, it is no secret the ending to ME3 left a lot to desire, and so having this game take place in the Andromeda galaxy, it was a clean slate for the writers to flex their creative muscles, and B, a good way for the fans to wash out the bad taste of the last game's ending, without being reminded of it every 5 seconds due to the writers having to deal with the consequences. Setting this game in the Andromeda galaxy wasn't BioWare's first concept for the next game after ME3 though. Before they settled on Andromeda, no pun intended, they were toying around with the idea of creating a prequel to Mass Effect 1, set during the First Contact War, a violent conflict between the humans and Turians. But fans were eager to let BioWare know that a prequel wouldn't cut it, and they wanted a true sequel to their beloved franchise. And so BioWare made the decision to make the next game an actual sequel, even if it takes place a long time after the events of ME3 in a galaxy far, far away. This doesn't mean that this game is completely detached from the original Mass Effect, of course, and there's actually a lot of cool smaller references and callbacks to previous games, locations and characters. The game even has an equivalent to the Protheans, the Remnants, and the main baddies, the Cat, share some similarities with earlier depictions of the Reapers and their husks. It even has its own version of the annoying council who won't listen to anything you say.
I assume you're taking the necessary security precautions.
Don't tell me how to do my job.
You are free to act as you see fit, Commander. Our role is to offer guidance and advice.
It's up to you if you're smart enough to listen.
I don't need this.
Communications cut, Commander.
So, if you're a serious veteran, you won't feel completely alienated. There's a lot of familiar concepts adapted and changed to be more fitting for the type of story they're trying to tell. I actually feel like Andromeda in many ways was supposed to be a fresh start for the franchise, to deliver on unfulfilled promises of the last games and reimagining the way you actually play Mass Effect. In a way, it feels like Andromeda is more of a spin-off rather than the true sequel BioWare promised us, and that's actually how I judged it during my most recent playthrough, as a sort of kinda spin-off game. I had to recalibrate my brain and how I wanted to approach it. Then, after some time, something clicked and I started to really enjoy my time with this game. When I first played Andromeda on launch, I went into it with the expectation of playing it just like the old trilogy, more story-driven and linear, and I didn't really warm up to what this game was actually trying to be. This time around, you're not some military commander, you're a pathfinder, someone tasked with finding a new home for the migrating people of the Milky Way galaxy. So you play as one of the Ryder twins, either male or female, led to this galaxy by your father and his joint effort Andromeda initiative. So this time around, with a fresh mindset, I gave in and actually really enjoyed exploring these vast worlds, terraforming them, establishing settlements, and getting to know the new crew, who you eventually form some unforgettable friendships with, just like in the old games. Sure, characters like Vetra and Drek fill familiar roles to what we've already seen in previous Mass Effects, but every one of them has a unique spin to them, making them much more unique and interesting. Take Vetra Nyx for example. She's the tough smuggler, jack of all trades. She already suffers the Turian cliché established in the older games, which depicts the Turians as a very honorable, militaristic people who have a deep respect for law and order. Anyway, once you get to know her, she opens up and you learn that she deeply cares for her little sister, who she raised since she has been very little. With their father being gone, Vetra had to resort to some illegal odd jobs to keep them both afloat. She's a tough cookie, but has a heart of gold, and you really get a better understanding of who she really is as a person, and what motivates her the more you play the game.
Seen you around. Ben, right? Came here with a family, didn't you? Son still in cryo? I could pull some strings, get him to the front of the line.
Really?
Yeah, really.
They told me he wasn't essential, but I miss him.
I know. I got family too, Ben.
It's done. Addison's gonna kill me.
Nicely done.
Part of the job, Pathfinder. All things considered, it was an easy ask. And right now, you need people tearing down obstacles, not putting up more.
And she's just one over hundreds of unique characters. And this kinda multifaceted writing style continues with, I'd say, almost every single one of them. It makes engaging with them in conversations so much more fun. I'd say it's one of the OG trilogy's biggest strengths, carried over flawlessly. Even if some of the wonky animations can destroy some of the more emotional moments. But more on that later. Also, Jarl is best boy and precious and must be protected at all costs. I feel like the gunplay of Mass Effect Andromeda is one of the biggest deviations and improvements to the OG trilogy. While the older games are fun, the combat does feel a little sluggish at times. In Mass Effect 1, 2, 3, you spend most of your playtime covering behind walls. And while this sort of cover shooter mechanics were all the rage in 2007, they aged fast, and it was obvious that Andromeda had to improve upon the system. In Andromeda, combat is fast and dynamic. Enemies are no sitting ducks either, they act fast and adapt to your playstyle. Some will flank you, others will force you out of your cover by throwing grenades, and others can turn invisible, attacking you from behind, leaving you no chance to sit behind hip-tall cover all day. Once you're surrounded in the old trilogy, there's little to no room to escape or defend yourself. But in Andromeda, you can use your all-new thruster pack and jump the hell out of there. After 3 games, we finally have a dedicated jump button, and it feels great, to be honest. The game is so much more dynamic because of it. They even gave us a more developed dodge move, carried over and improved upon from Mass Effect 3, and definitely some inspiration from Dark Souls, which even changes depending on what type of character profile you choose. With the game having no predefined classes but profiles, soldier, biotic and tech and so on, you have the full freedom to build your character the way you want. So for example, if you're feeling a bit bored of your soldier build, you can learn some biotics or tech skills to mix things up a bit. I feel like this plays a huge part in why I enjoyed playing through Andromeda right after the OG trilogy. The amount of player freedom and expression in different playstyles is honestly pretty fantastic. There are so many different skill combinations, and it's clear the devs want you to experiment. There's even a message popping up if you pulled off some cool combo moves. If I was ever unhappy with the way my character performed during combat situations, I would swap out some skills and try a different approach based on the new skills I just equipped. It can easily turn the tide during combat, always keeping you on your toes, especially on higher difficulties. And if you feel like you completely screwed up your build, you can always go back to the respec stations, located in Lexi's lab on the Tempest. Sure, this is carried over from Mass Effect 2 and 3, but thanks to not having such a restrictive class system, you can completely remodel your character from scratch mid-playthrough. And with a game as long as Andromeda, my playtime clocked in at more than 40 hours I think, it's a very welcome addition. In a way it actually feels like they simply adapted Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning's skill system. If you're going to copy from the best, I guess. That's not to say the class system of the old ME games is bad, but with the game being as long as it is, being restricted to the class you chose at the beginning of the game could potentially become real stale real fast, so I'm glad they went this route. At one point in the story, during the latter half of the game, it forces you to play as your sibling, in a segment not too dissimilar to the part in Mass Effect 2 where you play as Joker for the first time. The game effectively strips you of all your weapons and skills you earned throughout the playthrough. The game brilliantly shows you how far you've come. All of that muscle memory from the skills you've been using this whole time is useless. It makes you feel defenseless, and reminds you that your enemy still poses a huge threat to the people. Even if you can slice and dice through most of them like butter at this point. But it reinforces the importance of your mission and is reminding you that the stakes are pretty high. One of Mass Effect's more iconic features, the Paragon Renegade system, has been cut from Andromeda. This might sound like a bad thing at first, and while it worked for the OG trilogy, I feel like it was time for something more grey than the clear black and white. What BioWare opted for instead is even better in my opinion. Instead of just choosing between being a good or evil shepherd, or neutral for all of you normies out there, instead you can reply with logical, emotional, jokey or serious answers in conversations. And sure, most of them lead to the same outcome. But it honestly makes the dialogue more interesting, and it asks the player to pay more attention to the character's persona you're talking to, and judging your response based on that, rather than just, oh, I'ma be an asshole, or just the nicest of nice person. If an NPC is someone with a serious military background, like most of the Turians, then the best way to approach dialogue is to answer in a logical way. Unless you want to fuck with them, then you can go with jokey or emotional. It's much more multifaceted approach to dialogue than what Shepard ever got, so honestly a huge improvement in my opinion. So with all the positive things I had to say so far, it's not all sunshine and rainbows though. With movement and combat receiving huge overhauls and combat being much more dynamic because of the changes, the level architecture had to reflect that, so that the player can use their character's full potential and not be stopped by an invisible wall every 50 meters. What were short and linear levels in Mass Effect 1, 2, 3 are now sprawling open worlds, just waiting for you to be explored. And exploration was always a more hit-or-miss aspect of the gameplay in the original trilogy. Each installment focused more and more on linear combat areas rather than immersive and believable spaces for you to roam around and explore. This does come with a caveat though. These now enormous worlds need to be filled with content, and this is where Andromeda falters sadly. The game suffers from the Skyrim syndrome, where all the random loot you can find is mostly just junk or underleveled weapons and armor. It's really only there to be sold at vendors, but since there's now a crafting system, there isn't really any need for money, since you can craft much better gear than the one that's being sold at the vendors. And most of the tasks on these worlds, outside of the main objectives, are meaningless filler too. Collect X amount of Y, kill Z, scan dubious amounts of objects. Wide as the ocean, deep as a puddle is pretty fitting actually. And yes, you've heard right, scanning is also a new addition to the game. With you being a Pathfinder, you come into contact with alien technology and strange creatures nobody has ever seen before in the Milky Way galaxy. When scanning different objects in the game world, you earn research points that you can in turn spend on creating blueprints for better weapons and armor. To craft said item, you'll need crafting resources like minerals and different animal parts, parts, and these resources are scattered all over these gigantic maps. At least you don't have to walk all the distance. You get a new and improved Mako, the Nomad. This thing fucks. They finally nailed the handling of the vehicles. It's not like you're skating on ice anymore, like with the old Mako. And the 2 different driving modes are a great addition. You got 6-wheel all-terrain mode, so you can go up hills, and 4-wheel mode to barrel down said hill at top speeds. With all the improvements to the handling of the Nomad, it's sadly lacking in onboard weaponry. Sniping Geth from across the map with the Mako's onboard cannon was actually super fun, but I can see why they removed it. It was way too OP and it would take away the need to fight these foes on foot, and with so much work going into nailing the combat, I can see why they would not want the player to use the overpowered tank to obliterate everybody. The Mako's onboard cannons took away any challenge that the Geth otherwise would have posed, so it makes sense that they didn't bring back the onboard weapons. And if you're not feeling like fighting, you can always just barrel through the enemies, like a bowling ball. So, you win some, you lose some. It feels like the exploration in Andromeda could have used maybe a few more months in the oven to really iron out some of its flaws. I still feel like they could have made the Nomad able to defend itself without breaking the game's balance. For example, making the onboard weapons upgradable. One more reason to go out and start mining for resources. Speaking of mining, remember the kind of monotonous minigame in Mass Effect 2 where you'd scan a planet's surface for different kind of materials? Now it's the Nomad that's equipped with scanning equipment instead of your ship. Now you're scanning the ground as you traverse between quest markers, keeping you busy and making this minigame a bit more engaging. Because now you have to keep in mind the level's geometry, and you're going to need those resources to craft new gear and upgrade your existing one. I honestly just wish the rest of the planet exploration was as meaningful, or at the very least have some captivating writing accompany your fetch quests. Worked out great for The Witcher 3, nobody complained about it there. Even if the purpose for exploration and the correlating quests aren't super engaging, they still nailed the sense of discovery in Andromeda, and that's actually a very important aspect, I'd say. Landing and setting foot on a new planet feels exciting and refreshing, and honestly never gets old, no matter how many times you've done it. Only if you're spending too much time on the planet, it starts to get kinda unengaging and boring. Been there, done that. I still remember the first time crash landing on Habitat 7 in the intro and being blown away by this strange yet familiar alien world. In a way, I felt like a European explorer landing on the Americanas for the first time. It's familiar yet different. With the game having those gigantic maps, there's these loadout stations planted every, let's say, 200 meters or so. So with these stations, you get the chance to swap out weapons and consumables. But besides that, these stations let you swap out your teammates. So you get the chance to spend much more time with each respective squad member compared to the old games, where once you've found a great working combo for your playstyle, you're less likely to switch it up and experiment. Because you don't really get too many chances to do so anyways. Once you started a mission and chose your squad, there's no point during the mission to switch them out. And the random dialogue and banter between your teammates, the plays while you're driving around the Nomad, is a great touch and encourages even more to switch it up and hear more of the unique dialogues, really fleshing out the characters. It's greatly written and makes traversing the levels even less dull.
Joel, who were those women you were hugging on Aya?
My mothers.
5 mothers? That's a lot of mothers. That thing you did in that last fight?
When you have to beat many siblings to the dinner table, you learn to be quick.
Wish I could move like you do.
One of the original plans for this game was to have most, if not all planets, be randomly generated. A feature originally planned for Mass Effect 1 that was scrapped due to hardware limitations. And I feel like that would have been too much of a deviation from the formula that makes the Mass Effect great. So I'm honestly happy that they took a step back and chose to handcraft these planets instead. I'm just dreading the thought of depending on Iron Jesus' mercy to find crafting materials and loot. Mass Effect should stay as far away from No Man's Sky as possible. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, you might have heard about this. The person responsible for Andromeda's gameplay is a horrible racist. As if the broken state the game was in during its launch wasn't enough, the many stories about men we're here hit the nail into the coffin of Andromeda for many fans and would-be fans. It is a tricky and complex situation, A lot of people just outright refuse to enjoy the game because of this bloke, and I can 100% see where they're coming from, but I personally try to separate the art from the artist in this case. There are so many people who worked on this game, especially in the gameplay department, and I don't want to see all the hard work they put their soul into get overshadowed by this one moronic person sharing their racist beliefs on social media. Manveer left BioWare shortly after Andromeda launched, so there's that at least. Now, with this uncomfortable topic out of the way, visually Andromeda is very inconsistent. It's probably the game's biggest problem and the first thing you will notice. Everyone's first impression was ruined because of this, and many disappointed fans never gave it the chance it, in my opinion, deserves. Some character models look amazing. I especially love the alien races, and others not so much. It kinda feels like outsourcing gone bad, but I think what's actually responsible for this mess is the screwed up development of Andromeda and BioWare Montreal having to adapt to a, for them at least, completely new engine. And meanwhile, BioWare Austin didn't want to share their technical know-how they've acquired during the development of Dragon Age Inquisition on Frostbite 3, half a decade earlier. This kind of self-sabotage really hurt Andromeda's visual presentation in the long run, especially when some assets look super high-res and detailed, and others look like they're from, I don't know, 2 console generations ago. There's also a lot of clipping issues, textures taking too long to load in, and sometimes just really bizarre facial animations. I'm sure you've all seen the memes. PB actually T-posed a lot of times for me, and even when entering the galaxy map, the camera oftentimes just zoomed through my rider's head, making it feel super awkward and unfinished, I guess. Focusing on the good again, if nothing else, the environments look absolutely stunning. I especially love Aladdin with this sort of retro sci-fi look. Sometimes I just wander around its endless sand dunes, soaking in the atmosphere. It's really amazing, to be honest. It almost looks lifelike, but obviously you would never see something like this in real life, at least not in our lifetimes. Speaking of the sand dunes, there's a gigantic mechanized sandworm, just like in the Dune books. So the game is very open with its inspiration there. In a later mission, don't worry, no spoilers, it's such a cool throwback to Ios and Vermeer from ME1 combined, dropping you into this war zone from high altitude, but this time taking place on a Forerunner shield world from Halo. You can't believe how good it felt to finally see a lush and green world after traversing all these kind of dead and destroyed desert planets. While still on the topic of presentation, let's talk about the music for a bit. Instead of series mainstay Jack Wall, Andromeda's score is composed by John Perzano, I hope I'm pronouncing this correct. If not, I'm sorry dude, I don't know what to say. Who worked on a lot of the Marvel TV shows and most recently composed for Sony's Spider-Man games, as well as Detroit Become Human. When you launch Andromeda, it greets you with this awe-inspiring and emotional menu track. In my opinion, even rivaling Virgil's theme from the first Mass Effect. It really does invoke a sense of wonder and mystery, and it makes you think of all the possible adventures you can have in this totally new and uncharted galaxy. It is absolutely fitting to the themes of the game and encapsulates it beautifully. Now, the main menu song is sadly the highlight though. The rest of the music is very ambient and is more in the background. You don't really notice it. It does its job, but you won't get any memorable pieces like the Vermeer ride or Pharaoh's theme, for example. This technically isn't a bad thing though. Because of the game's open nature, the music needs to be less memorable. If every planet had such memorable melodies like in the OG trilogy, they would become stale really fast, because now you're spending so much more time on these planets, and so repeating the same kind of melody for sometimes hours on end would honestly make them less special and kind of annoying, I would imagine. So it's kinda a necessary evil, I would say. Earlier on I said that I don't want to spoil the story, but let me just say this. The ending to this game feels rushed and unfinished, unfortunately. It feels like there should be more game afterwards, which is weird considering it's actually much longer than any Mass Effect game before it. There's a lot of loose story threads, and I feel that's again the fault of the troubled development. The keyword is Quarian Arc. Now, there were rumors of story DLC expanding on those loose ends, but seeing as it's now 4 years since launch and nothing happening since, I don't think that's going to happen, sadly. EA didn't even give them enough time to iron out all these bugs, and still stopped support for the game shortly after launch, being fully aware that there are still bugs and visual glitches in the game. There was some hope back around the time it was announced that the game would receive an Xbox One X update, running in 4K and supporting HDR on the system, but after that, no more words on any new content being developed, so yeah. Okay, I won't lie, once the credits started rolling and the ending song performed by Aurora kicks in, tears actually rolled down my cheek. I kinda realized I just played something very special to me, and I was one of the people who was super disappointed when the game first dropped. I urge anyone who's giving up around launch time to give it another shot. The people who worked so hard to push this game out the doors deserve another fair chance, after all the blood, sweat and tears they poured into it. It never really had a fair chance, with so many controversies hindering its success before the game even launched. In a perfect world, EA would have given them, I don't know, another 6 months to maybe a year to actually finish the game. And I enjoyed my time with what we got, but it still makes me wonder what the team at BioWare Montreal could have achieved with a more focused development, without all the self-sabotage and no rush by a greedy publisher trying their damnedest to release the game early. Post-launch updates and DLC could only have fixed so much, but the game didn't even receive any of that. Andromeda is a good game that could have been incredible. It just never got the love it clearly deserved. Not by the developers, not by the publisher, and definitely not by the fans. It's actually sad seeing this new story with all the great characters we got to know along the way being completely ignored by EA and fans alike. For all we know, Mass Effect 4, or whatever they are going to call it, will go back to the Milky Way galaxy. I for one would love to go back to Andromeda one day and see what all the characters I've grown to love have been up to ever since the last time we saw them. And to end on an even more bitter note, the game even ends on sequel bait. Man, talk about unfortunate. There is this one short line of dialogue after the credits rolled, and it affected me on a deeply emotional level. It's not exactly profound writing or anything, but I guess it just really connected with me.
Your father invented this role, but you defined it.
It really did feel like I found my own path after all this time. I felt that. I truly, it really hit me. I don't know why. Such a small blink it and you'll miss it moment, but it really stuck with me, to be honest. The future is looking bright for Mass Effect and BioWare in general. The teaser trailer for the next Mass Effect, while vague, did show fan favorite best girl, Liara. Fight me, Tally fans. And the response so far has been great. And BioWare's new CEO promised to rebuild the studio's past reputation after stumbling for the last 8 years or so. Not every game they made was bad, but Dragon Age Inquisition, Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem didn't really deliver the same level of quality, and I guess a studio with such high reputation as BioWare's, the fans expected better. Quote, "This studio is unique in that it has an incredible history of building critically successful games and universes that are truly loved by so many fans. For me, success is all about rebuilding that reputation and delivering on that promise of quality. While I'm sad to see Andromeda slowly be forgotten, fading into obscurity, I'm hyped for the return to the Milky Way galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, we will see the Pathfinder again one day. This whole situation taught me something. To be more open to change, and that there's always two sides to the coin. I guess if I had to give the game a rating, it would be a high 7 or low 8. It means there's more good than bad. So to the people saying, oh, 7, oh, such a great game. Honestly, in my opinion, a game receiving a 7 is worth playing. Full stop. If you're still listening, thank you. This means a lot to me. I'm still figuring out this whole YouTube thing. I guess I'm a slow learner. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I know it's kind of a mess. I went in and wrote the script right around the time I finished the game. And I just really wanted to get my thoughts out there because I truly feel like the time to hate on this game is over. And it's finally time for the fans and the general public to re-evaluate their thoughts on this game. Because like I said, it really felt like I was playing something special. Alright, hopefully we will hear each other in future videos soon. So yeah, take care everybody.